It was late, way too late. The party had died down hours ago, but you know how it is. One more drink, one more conversation, and suddenly it's 2:30 in the morning. All I wanted was my own bed. I got in my car, the engine a low growl in the dead silence of the night, and started the long drive home. The highway was completely deserted. Just a ribbon of asphalt cutting through miles of dense, dark forest. The kind of darkness that swallows your headlights just a few feet ahead. My eyelids felt heavy, the lines on the road were starting to blur together, and the soft music from the radio wasn't helping. I was just on the edge of nodding off, my head heavy against the window when I saw him. Right there, smack in the middle of my lane. A boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He was just standing there, motionless, his face pale as bone in the sudden glare of my high beams. He wore simple, old-fashioned clothes, and his eyes were fixed on me, wide and dark and completely empty. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just stood there like a statue, waiting. My heart hammered against my ribs. Pure, cold adrenaline shot through me. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming in protest, and yanked the steering wheel hard to the right. The world became a blur of spinning trees and screeching metal. There was a sickening crunch as my car slammed into something solid. Then, darkness. When I came to, my head was throbbing and the smell of airbag powder and pine filled the car. The engine was dead. The only sound was the frantic ticking of the cooling metal and my own ragged breathing. My first thought wasn't about the car or my head. It was about the boy. I scrambled out of the wreckage, my legs shaking. "Hey, are you okay?" I yelled into the oppressive silence. "I'm so sorry." "Are you hurt?" "Nothing." The highway was empty. The spot where he'd been standing was just bare asphalt. I limped over, my phone's flashlight cutting a weak beam through the gloom. I searched the shoulder, the ditch, the edge of the woods. There were no footprints, no broken branches, no sign that anyone, let alone a small child, had been there at all. It was as if he had just vanished into thin air. The police showed up eventually, followed by an ambulance. They asked me what happened. I told them everything about the party, being tired, and about the boy on the road. They exchanged glances. The officer just nodded slowly and wrote in his notebook. "You were probably just seeing things," he said, his voice gentle but dismissive. "It happens when you're exhausted. You're lucky you just hit a tree." Everyone said the same thing. The paramedics, my friends, my family, they all insisted I was tired, that I'd imagined him, that my mind had played a cruel trick on me in that moment between sleep and wakefulness. Maybe I had a few drinks, sure, but I wasn't that out of it. I know what I saw. I can still see his pale face, his unblinking stare. They say I'm lucky to be alive, but I don't feel lucky. I feel watched. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that highway. I see him standing there, waiting for me. I know in my bones that he wasn't a hallucination. He was real, and whatever that thing was, standing in the middle of that lonely road, it wasn't a boy. It was something else, something ancient and cold. And I know, without a shadow of a doubt, it didn't want me to leave that highway alive. Have you ever had one of those moments where you look back and think, wow, if one tiny thing had been different, my whole life would have changed? I had one of those moments, and it still gives me chills just thinking about it. It all started on a totally normal evening. I was just learning to drive, and my mom, being the awesome mom she is, decided to let me practice by driving us to pick up a pizza. You know, a classic teenage rite of passage. So we hopped in the car. I was probably a little nervous, a little excited, and we headed to the local pizza place. We placed our order, and they told us it would be about 20 minutes. We waited, chatting about nothing important, just enjoying the moment. Then maybe 10 minutes in, the guy behind the counter calls our number, order for ... double quotes, and he calls our name. My mom and I looked at each other, kind of surprised. "That was fast," she said. The pizza was ready early. We didn't think anything of it, just grabbed the box, inhaled that amazing pizza smell, and headed home. The drive back was smooth. I was probably feeling pretty proud of myself, navigating the streets without any issues. We pulled into our driveway, parked the car, and went inside. I remember setting the pizza down on the kitchen counter, the whole house starting to smell like pepperoni and cheese. It was just a perfect, ordinary family night starting to unfold. And then everything changed. Not even 5 minutes after we walked through the door, we heard it. An ear-splitting screech of tires, followed by the most sickening, crunching sound of metal on metal you can ever imagine. It was so loud, it shook the windows. My mom and I froze. We ran to the front window and peered outside, our hearts pounding. Down the street, maybe 100 yards from our house, was absolute chaos. A bright red sports car, this thing looked like it was straight out of a movie, was completely mangled. It had plowed head-on into a minivan. Smoke was pouring from both vehicles. People were already running out of their houses, phones to their ears, shouting. It was a horrific scene. We later found out the story, and it was even crazier than we could have imagined. The guy driving the red sports car wasn't the owner. He had stolen it from a party just a few blocks away. He was high on drugs and trying to outrun the police when he lost control and veered into oncoming traffic right into that minivan. The family in the minivan, miraculously, was okay. Shaken up, terrified, but physically alright. We heard later that they were just leaving their house when their baby started crying uncontrollably. The mom had to unbuckle and go to the back to soothe the baby, which delayed them by just a couple of minutes. Those few minutes saved them from being in the intersection at the exact moment the stolen car came flying through. But then, an even colder, more terrifying realization washed over me. It hit me like a physical blow. The pizza. The pizza was ready early. If it had been ready on time, we would have left the restaurant 10 minutes later. If I had driven just a little bit slower, maybe hesitated at a stop sign for an extra second, we would have been right there. Our car would have been in that exact spot at that exact time. That minivan could have been us. It's one of those what-if scenarios that plays over and over in your head. A few seconds, a few minutes, a pizza being ready early. These tiny, insignificant details, these random quirks of fate, are sometimes the only things standing between a normal evening and a life-altering tragedy. That night taught me how fragile life is, and how a crying baby saved one family, while a lucky, early pizza saved mine. It's a powerful reminder to appreciate every single moment. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have a moment like this that changed your perspective, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing for more stories. Stay safe out there. It was 1996. A storm was raging, the kind that turns the sky black in the middle of the day. I was driving my friend Ben down Route 47, and the rain was coming down so hard it felt like we were underwater. The wipers were fighting a losing battle, and visibility was practically zero. I remember gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white, just trying to keep us on the road. We were just two friends, heading home, talking about nothing important. The biggest worry on our minds was what we were going to do that weekend. In a split second, everything changed. Out of the sheets of rain, a pair of headlights appeared, moving way too fast. Before I could even process what was happening, the car hydroplaned. It was like watching a movie in slow motion. The screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal on metal, the impact was violent. It threw our car into a spin, sending us careening across the wet asphalt. I remember a chaotic blur of rain, glass, and darkness. Then a final bone-jarring crash as we slammed into a guardrail. The world went silent except for the relentless drumming of the rain on the roof. For a moment, I was just stunned, my ears ringing. I turned to Ben. He was slumped over in the passenger seat, unconscious. There was blood, a lot of it. My heart dropped into my stomach when I saw his leg. It was trapped, crushed under the mangled dashboard. I shook him, yelling his name, but there was no response. The darkness outside was absolute. This was 1996, so no cell phones to call for help. No cars passed by on the deserted road. It was just me, the storm, and my best friend slipping away in the seat next to me. I felt a level of helplessness I've never experienced before or since. Every minute felt like an hour. I tried to free his leg, but it was useless. I kept talking to him, begging him to wake up, telling him help was on the way, even though I had no idea if that was true. I was just a kid, completely out of my depth, faced with a life or death situation. The minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, a cold dread washing over me as I watched him, terrified that he was breathing his last breaths right there beside me. Finally, like a miracle, a pair of distant lights cut through the rain. Rescue had arrived. The paramedics and firefighters were a whirlwind of professional, calm activity. They used the jaws of life to cut the car apart and free Ben. As they worked, one of the paramedics put a hand on my shoulder. The words he said will be etched in my memory forever. His leg can't be saved. That night, a normal drive home turned into a nightmare. It taught me, in the most brutal way possible, how quickly life can change and how a single moment can leave scars that you carry with you forever. Thanks for listening to my story.